Okay, here is a short lecture video on how to analyze literature, and the key piece is really the theme, thesis, and directional statement. So this one's I would say very pragmatic lesson because it deals specifically with your essays. And again, and as you know, as this is your third English credit, the vast majority of writing in an English class is relative and relates to the essay on some level, where might be an argument or a paragraph or a full 5 paragraph analysis, right? So either way, I think this is an important lecture for you to listen to and reflect on. So I'm just going to share my screen here with you, and then flip to the lecture here. So here we go. So as I said, so this one is on a basis and a background, and hopefully at some point part a review for you on how to get the most out of what you're reading, so you could do the most with it when it comes to your writing. Okay, that's the idea here. So the big thing is, when you're reading, you want to be focusing on what you're reading is what you want to be focusing on is theme. Theme is that central or controlling idea in the work. It dominates. The word that I like is controlling and dominating. It shapes the work. Okay, and usually that, what I mean by that, it's an abstract idea, okay, that's explored by the author. So it could be something like freedom, it could be identity, liberty, power. These are abstract ideas. These are ideas that we can't hold in our hand, right? These are ideas that are as abstract as time is. Okay, these are key ideas or subjects that a lot of literature, a lot of good quality literature, comes back to continuously. The author makes, now this is an important piece, okay? The author makes the idea concrete through characters and situations, symbolism, so forth, right? So they bring what's called the abstraction to life. Okay, they bring the abstract idea of liberty, of power, of justice, to life through their novel, through their characters. That's what authors do. Okay, so they bring a consequence to the observation, and I'll explain what that means in a couple of minutes. Okay, but what you need to understand at this point is everything in English starts with the observation. Okay, what do I notice about here? What ideas am I noticing? What abstract ideas am I noticing? Am I noticing something about identity? Am I noticing something about power? Am I noticing something about justice or liberty or knowledge of some sort? And then the consequence to that is important. All right. Okay, there. You can see that I'm doing this quite live. um, Anyways, so you have a consequence to the observation, and ultimately that theme and the theme statement that you'll see connects to the human condition. That's an important piece to know, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So how do you work at creating these theme statements? A theme statement is a sentence or a statement about the main idea of the work. Okay, this is important. Theme statements are essential. Okay, you must have one of these before you really progress on any level of writing on the work that you're being assigned to. So it tells the reader what is evident in the work of literature that you're offering an analysis on. It's a sentence or a statement. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. It's not a one-word thing. Okay, so a theme is not a word. So like I've given you an example here from a novel that's studied at grade 10. Some of you might be very familiar with it, that the theme of the Lord of Flies is power. It's a flawed theme statement. It's not an actual theme. Okay, even though it's expressed in a sentence, as you can see up and through here, it's expressed as a sentence or a statement, it's not an actual theme, because a theme, the general rule is a theme cannot be explained or expressed in one word only. Okay, so power is not a theme on itself. Power, if we go back, is that idea. It's an abstract idea, right? It's a subject. It's not a theme, because there's been none of this. There's no consequence to that. Remember that the author makes the theme concrete by offering a consequence. So when you're coming up with a theme statement, okay, it's not the theme of the Lord of the Flies is power. It's more so of the theme of the Lord of Flies is that power is a destructive force that brings about the demise of one's humanity. So let's take a look at that example for a second. The observation is that power is a destructive force. That's the observations. What's the consequence? What's the so what? So to that observation, well, the so what is that it destroys an individual's humanity. It destroys who they are essentially as an individual, as a person, that their humanity no longer exists. So you have an observation and you have a consequence to this, right? So and it tells the reader, and when you have a complete theme statement, the reader completely understands what they might learn from a close reading of the text. Okay, so if I knew that theme statement ahead of time, before I read The Lord of the Flies, I would know that when I'm reading this, I'm looking for something, an idea that power is a destructive force that brings about the demise or the end of one's humanity. They cease to be human. They're no longer human, right? And there you have an observation about power as a destructive force, and there you have a consequence to that as it being a demise of one's humanity. A wonderful theme statement. Okay, and then if you were to have a proper theme statement, it allows you to move into the thesis statement very easily, because 99% of the writing you do in English class, folks, is theme development essays. Okay, um, you evaluate the manner in which the theme of blank 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 is developed in Fahrenheit 451. Whatever, for whatever example. Okay, the theme development, you're trying to show how it's developed. So you start with the theme and then you get to the thesis, which I'll explain in just a few little bits. This is an important piece. Okay, what we have to be mindful here of is that there's a proper way of getting to a theme statement. Now, I've really drawn this out. There's like 4 steps here. It becomes incredibly I've been very systematic in my outline here. The hope and the goal eventually is that you don't necessarily need to go all these 4 steps. You know that you're looking for an observation and a consequence. Okay, but really let's quickly go through these steps here. So step 1 is that you get a subject. You start with this idea. It's the observation. Okay, that there in the Lord of the Flies, one of the big subjects is power. That's great. That's an observation. It's not a theme on its own, remember. Okay, that's an observation. The second step there is what happens because of that idea of power in the novel. What happens? Well, it destroys everything. Okay, it's a destructive force. Okay, and that's kind of cleaning things up. Then you kind of put it together. And in your theme statement, you kind of actually want to be a little bit more specific, because the more specific you can be, the easier it is to write on. Okay, the more focused your essay will be. So I added at the end of that, it brings about the demise of one's humanity, because now I have a central focus on my theme, that it's a destructive force that brings about the demise of one's humanity. Now I can actually zero in on in the novel of where that actually happens, where power destroys humanity. Okay, it makes things easier for you if you're more specific in your theme statement. Okay, this is the challenge for most English students, is coming up with a proper theme statement. So it's going to be a work in progress. Okay, I know that and I understand that, but this is an easy way, at least, to kind of focus your work and try to come up with that proper theme statement. Okay. So often you'll be asked to respond to theme prompts, and in responding to theme prompts, it becomes a little bit challenging sometimes. So you'll be asked to discuss the manner in which this theme is developed in the particular work. This is my earlier comment that this is basically 99% of English writing or essay writing comes down to you responding to what's called a theme prompt. So how do you go about doing this? Okay, so here's a good example of an essay that your topic, an essay topic that you might have seen or might see if you were to be in a class that's studying, let's say, The Lord of the Flies. So discuss the manner in which Golding uses imagery to develop a theme of your choice in The Lord of the Flies. So in doing so, you have to come up, first of all, with theme. You have to come up with a theme. And then the second part of that question is asking you, how does this imagery, okay, the appeal to your 5 senses, work to develop the theme that you come up with? Got to understand the question first. All right. So we understand the question first. It's ask you to focus on how imagery is being used to develop a theme. Okay. That's what you're not looking at anything else. You're not looking at symbolism. You're not looking at diction. You're looking at imagery. That's key to remember, folks. Read the question and read the prompt, the theme prompt, very carefully. So it's asking you here to link style to theme, right? Then you have to decide on how it does this. Okay, imagery is a broad category. It allows for multiple different approaches. You could just focus on auditory images. You could talk about the visceral type imagery. You could talk about image contrast in imagery of light and dark. There's a multitude of different ways to approach this. It's up to you in terms of how you want to take that broad category of imagery and focus it down a little bit more. All right. Again, while we're going pretty fast here, the goal here of this lecture is just to kind of get you thinking about these kind of things. You get lots of practice through this. So the thesis piece. So let's just kind of finish up here a little bit on this. Is you really kind of want to zero in on what the question's asking you. Okay. My rule here, and I'll get to the rule of 1 or 3 a little bit later as well, but the rule of 1 or 3 is key, and you must remember this. The rule of 1 or 3 is that you, when selecting your arguments, so that your 1, 2, 3s for your introduction, that you're not mixing narrative elements and literary techniques. That's enough for right now. We will return to the rule of 1 or 3 in a little bit. Okay, so this is the same thing here. This is a literary technique. This is imagery. So you want to be focused just on imagery here. You don't want to bring in a whole host of other things. Does that mean you can't talk about character? Not at all. Okay, but you have to talk about character in relation to imagery. Okay, that's the catch here, if you're to do character. So here's the thesis piece of it, and hopefully you are pretty good with coming up with a thesis statement. If you can come up with your theme statement, which is earlier, right? Coming up with the theme statement. If you can come up with this, with your theme statement here, you've already got a thesis statement, folks. And that's why the actual coming up with the theme is more difficult for the thesis. And I'll get to what I mean by that in a second. But remember that thesis is that central idea that controls your essays, the idea or the argument that you are trying to present, that you are arguing within your essay. Okay, it's the whole purpose of why you're writing. You're trying to prove something, right? And coming back here, what I don't want to see is descriptive essays. Descriptive essays are ones that are basically grocery shopping lists. This is where you see imagery. Mr. Joel, you'll see imagery in Lord of the Flies here, here, and here. And then they're describing those images rather than interpreting them. What you do in an essay is you interpret it with respect to the theme that you're trying to say is there or is being developed. Right? We'll talk about this a little bit more as well. Get lots of practice, additional lessons on this as we work through the course. Okay, so the next following your thesis statement is what's called a directional statement. That's your 1, 2, 3. These are the main points to be developed in order to support your essay. And this is where I'm going to catch the rule of 1 or 3 and come back to that. My rule of 1 or 3 is that you can create your arguments either in as 1 or either as 3. Okay, so what that means is that you, if you're doing character and you want to do character, you choose either 3 characters that go back to your argument, or you choose 1 character and explain that character in 3 ways. It's the same thing with symbols. If you can choose 3 different symbols as it relates to your thesis or your theme, or you can choose 1 symbol and explain its nuanced meanings in 3 different ways, okay, as it relates back to it. I can't say which way is better. It all depends on your theme, and it all depends on what you're using to support it. That being said, what you don't want to do in your directional statement is mix literary techniques, okay, symbolism, imagery, diction, so forth, with narrative elements, plot, atmosphere, character, conflict, theme, and setting. They don't get along that well. You can talk about character through imagery, but your image has to be the focus. Again, we'll get lots of practice through this as we work to support the development of the introduction, which includes your topic sentence, your thesis statement, your directional statement. And your thesis statement basically is a reworked theme statement. So your theme is this, it's developed by this, okay? And that's primarily your introduction, okay? Hopefully that's helped out a little bit. What I will do is is put up an additional videos down the road, focusing on some examples and you'll see some examples of what I mean by proper introductions. If you have a good introduction, you'll have a good essay. That's primarily the rule. If you have an unfocused theme, only has an observation, has no consequence to it, your essay is going to be a lot plot based. It's going to be very descriptive. It's not going to be interpretive, right? There's a big difference between an essay that's descriptive and an essay that's interpretive. Okay, and we want you to be in that interpretive realm now. We don't want you to be in simply describing the events of the novel. That leads to plot summary. If you've ever had a teacher give you an essay back or a piece of writing back and it says plot, 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 it's probably because you are being descriptive. You're just describing what the events that happened in the novel and not connecting it back to a larger issue, such as your theme, controlling idea. All right. Hopefully that's helped and clear some things up.